What's happening, everybody? It's Sean with Reactions to the Classics, and today we have a reaction to Grateful Dead and some suites of songs. There's 4 of them, or 6, however you want to look at it, but this is brought to us by a friend, longtime supporter, and a big-time Deadhead, D. Thank you, D. Always appreciate you. I've done a Grateful Dead Top 10 and a Jerry Garcia Top 10 courtesy of D, but as D explained, they're really known for their suites of songs, sit there in the long jam. So he put these together. So we're going to check them out. And all this write-up is from D. He's the expert here. I did some research. None of it had any more than what he had. So let's see what D has to say here. The Grateful Dead were known for their live shows, which contained, among other things, extended jams. These jams were all improvised, which I always viewed as creating new music live. In the early years, this was a unique experience. No other band did this, at least initially. Their shows could last 5 to 6 hours or more. In their shows, individual songs could easily last 10 to 20 minutes or more. They would put different songs together consistently. Occasionally, they would mix those up also. You never knew what they were going to do. Many times, the band didn't either, as there were no set lists. The band would just wing it, going with what felt right at the time. Did this always work? No, but when it did, it created some of the most exciting music around. They tried to take this approach to their studio albums with songs that, while the band was sometimes disappointed with the results, I found fascinating, D says. This is not a top 10 list, as that would create a video that could last hours. Instead, this will be a top 4, 5, or 6 list, depending on how you look at the songs. More on that later. Also, these will be listed in chronological order as opposed to preference, as my preferences change from time to time, with one exception. A note to my fellow Deadheads. There are a number of songs that could and should be included here, most notably Dark Star. The best known version on Live Dead is over 23 minutes long, which is prohibitive for this format because we try to limit everything to 60 minutes or less of music. In addition, you will notice I have included music from the album Blues for Allah, but left off the title track, which could also have a place here. I really like that track. However, I consider it something that it takes several listens to appreciate. Again, not the best choice for this format. I encourage folks who are interested to give both of these a listen or two. When the band was signed by Warner Brothers, they went to Los Angeles to record their first album. The record company assigned David Hassinger to produce the album. It was not a good experience for either, and the album was disappointing. When they decided to record their second album, they wanted to have more control. Initially, David Hassinger was going to work with them. Bob Weir tells a story that he told David that in a certain place in a song, he wanted the sound of, quote, thick air. Apparently, David kept repeating, he wants the sound of thick air again and again as he walked out of the studio, never to be seen again. From then on, they produced the album themselves. It was titled Anthem of the Sun. One of the problems they ran into was that they put so much into the 8 tracks that when the records were pressed, the sound came out muddy. It has been improved over the years, but it is still noticeable. The first track on side 1 of this album was our first track, Suite 1. That's it for the other one. And D says this is his favorite Grateful Dead song, either live or on this album. This is the Grateful Dead at their weirdest and most psychedelic. He said the lyrics of the song talk about the early days of the band. They teamed up with the Merry Pranksters, headed by Ken Casey, who wrote One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and Neil Cassidy, who was the inspiration for the character of Dean Moriarty in the novel On the Road and other works authored by Allen Ginsberg. Cassidy's body was found at the side of some railroad tracks in Mexico in 1968. In the first movement of this suite, written by Jerry Garcia, called Cryptical Envelopment, the refrain sings, he had to die. D says, I always believed they were talking about Cassidy. The second part, Quadlibet for Tenderfeet, contains live music from 4 different performances of the song, moving from one channel to the other. It comes out sounding like some sort of musical braid. It's an interesting visualization. I like that description. All that eventually lands on part 3, The Faster We Go, The Rounder We Get, which includes vocals written by Bob Weir that talk about the band's experiences with riding on the bus, driven by cowboy Neil Cassidy with the Merry Pranksters across America. And then goes back to the first movement for one more verse and goes back to part 2, which again plays 4 different live performances, which then fades into part 4, We Leave the Castle, which is some challenging electronic music composed by new keyboardist Tom Constantin. Altogether, these parts comprise what I consider to be the quintessential psychedelic song/experience. At the very least, there is nothing else like it. It was received very positive reviews at the time, since it's more like the trend-setting new music people expected of the band. This song's only 7:40, so all those things are going to be in this 7:40. I'm going to have the lyrics up as always. The music will not be in the video, guys, so Check out the Vimeo link below. You can listen to all of it with me, which is kind of necessary if you're going to listen to it and have this kind of experience. Like I said, I've never listened to a Grateful Dead album. I know this is kind of the thing, right? I'm just fine with the Grateful Dead. I'm not a fan. I don't hate it. I'm just kind of there. So maybe this is going to get me turned over to the path of fandom. But I appreciate D as always, and let's get after it. All right, that's it for the other one, the suite of that. D did such a good job describing this at the start. I don't think I have to really describe a whole lot about what the song is about. I did find in the faster we go, the rounder we get part, there's a part in here where Bob writes, skipping through the lily fields, I came across an empty space. It trembled and exploded, left a bus stop in its place. And he says, the bus came by and I got on. That's when it all began. There was a cowboy Neil at the wheel of the bus to never, ever land. And Bob has said he had written this whole verse the night Neil Cassidy had died. He explained in a documentary how he believes that because of Cassidy's death, he was able to transcend his physical form. Weir went on to state that anytime he sings this verse, he feels that Neil's spirit is with him. So I thought that was an interesting take. But otherwise, the songs are about just, what D said. I think the instrumentation was great. It didn't overstay its welcome. It changed up enough that it didn't even seem like 7 minutes and 40 seconds, even though that's going to be our shortest one on here. I mean, the musicianship, as you would expect. Phil on the bass, drums, Mickey Hart and Bill, Kreutzmann, Jerry and Bob, on the different parts with the lead vocals, Tom's piano, Bob on the rhythm. It's just Ron Pigpen on the organ. So yeah, I mean, it was a good jam. It was a really good way to start. I pulled that off of it was only audio, obviously, off a YouTube clip that D had sent me. Now we're going to go over to Spotify for this next one, so you'll be able to see it up there. We got Weather Report Suite. It's about 12 minutes, 40 seconds. D says this suite is much simpler and comes from their 9th album, 1973's Wake of the Flood. It's written by Bob Weir and two different lyricists, Eric Anderson for part one and John Perry Barlow for part two. Eric Anderson was a singer-songwriter. The band met on their Festival Express train tour across Canada in 1970. John Barlow was a school friend of Bob Weir's who became his primary lyricist over the years. The song starts out with an acoustic guitar prelude. The rest of the song is divided into two parts, simply called Part 1 and Part 2, in parentheses, Let It Grow. Part 1 is a sweet and pretty love song. Part 2 is more energetic. Both have references to working the earth and, of course, weather issues. It has many influences, including folk, country, and jazz. The latter part includes solos by saxophone and harmonica. A rare combination. A rare combination indeed, D. Let's check this one out. Well, there you have it. Weather Report Suite. I really dug that, man. If you're watching this and you're a Deadhead and you're like, man, this dude isn't getting all excited. It's, we have almost 1,400 videos up on this channel. I listen to a lot of music. I got to take it all in, right? I'm trying to take in every nuance of it. The two songs are definitely different. For a little while, I was going to tell you I definitely liked Part 1 better, but the longer Part 2 went, I'm not so sure about that. Probably kind of an even up thing. Part 1, some of the lyrics, Golden Hills, now veiled in gray, summer leaves have blown away. Now what remains? The wind and rain. And like a desert spring, my lover comes and spreads her wings. Like a song that's born to soar the sky, flowing till the waters all are dry, the loving in her eyes. And then we get to that second part, Let It Grow. It has more of almost a biblical sense to it, right? Morning comes, she follows the path to the river shore, lightly sung, her song in the latch on the morning's door. See the sun sparkle in the reeds, silver beads pass into the sea. Very descriptive songwriting. And then it comes round and round the cut of the plow in the furrowed field, seasons round the bushels of corn and the barley meal. Broken ground, open and beckoning to the spring, black dirt live again. And it ends out with, what shall we say? Shall we call it by a name as we count, as well to count the angels dancing on a pin, water bright as the sky from which it came, and the name is on the earth that takes it in. We will not speak, but stand inside the rain and listen to the thunder shout, I am, I am, I am, which, is in the Bible. That's how God refers to himself. I am. So interesting there, like that. I talked about, there's a little bit of, almost sounds like a pedal steel in here, but the instrumentation credits aren't great on what I'm looking at on Genius, because the horn section in the second part is really, really good. There's no musician's credits for that. Maybe there isn't anywhere. I don't know. Maybe they're session musicians and they didn't dive them out or delve them out at the time. But just great work. Really like that one. Now we're going to go back over to YouTube just to pull this so we get the right version. We've got Help on the Way, Slipknot, Franklin's Tower. It's almost 15 minutes long. D says in 1974, the band announced they were breaking up. They held a series of 5 concerts in October of that year. D says, I still have my ticket, which is labeled the last one. It was assumed that their career as we knew it was over. However, it turned out to simply be a hiatus. In September of 1975, they released their 8th studio album, Blues for Allah, and resumed touring. It was their highest charting album to that point, reaching 12 in the U.S. This is a suite that I was referring to when I mentioned it could be considered a top 4, 5, or 6. Slipknot is an instrumental passage linking Help on the Way to Franklin's Tower. When they played it live, it was never the same either lengthwise or melody-wise. So is it a song in the traditional sense? People I've spoken to over the years disagree about this. In any event, these songs were almost always played together live, which is why I've included them as a suite on this list. Instead of playing the versions of the suite from Blues for Allah, he's asking me to play this live version. It's taken from the first concert they played after what turned out to be their hiatus. It was at a small venue in San Francisco called the Great American Music Hall and released on an album CD called One from the First Vault in 1991. It was about 2 weeks before the release of the album and the first time these songs had ever been played live, which that's pretty cool. So let's check this out. Well, there you go. Help on the Way, Slipknot, Franklin's Tower. You know, it's interesting listening to something this long because I want to bring my thoughts to it. And it's hard to remember what you heard at the beginning, you know, just the intricacies of it. But Help on the Way, a shorter song, more abstract, you know, it's just one verse. I mean, it's a longer verse, but Paradise waits on the crest of a wave, or angels in flames. She has no pain, like a child she is pure, she is not to blame, poised for flight, wings spread bright, spring from night into the sun. So that kind of lyricism in there, obviously, you know, and I'm a broken record on this, but the instrumentation on all of these songs is just so tight. I mean, this is just such professional musicianship. Obviously, the guitar work is the highlights, but everything is good. I mean, everything is good. The drumming's great. Keyboards are nice. Bass is nice, you know, understated on some of these. Some of them, you know, Phil gets to take a little more of a prime role, but on most of these, it's more in the background a little bit. But man, so enjoyed Franklin's Tower, and then we go to Slipknot, which is just the instrumentation in there. That's where the guitar work was just outstanding, just a nice jam. And then we go into Franklin's Tower. So it has some abstract lyrics to a certain extent too, but the chorus, Roll Away the Dew, was the most catchy thing I've heard so far. Not that catchy is all about, you know, there's a lot of catchy stuff of songs that I don't like. They're just catchy and they stick in your head. So catchy isn't the mark of a good song. But I just want to point out that the chorus in this, there's actually a chorus, and it is one of those things where it's like, oh yeah, I hear that, roll away the dew. And according to the lyricist Robert Hunter, the Roll Away the Dew line is appropriated from a fairly well-known sea shanty, whatever the heck that means. He does say in here too, verse 2, I'll tell you where the four winds dwell, in Franklin's Tower where hangs a bell. And so he says this about that. He said, this song appears in 1975, the year after my son was born, and the year before the American bicentennial. Both facts are entirely irrelevant. The allusion to the Liberty Bell and the situation of the Philadelphia Congress and the hometown of Ben Franklin is not gone unnoticed by other commentators. This song is a birthday wish both for my son and for my country, each young, subjected to the winds of vicissitude, individual and collective freedom, liberty conscious, all that is conjured by those concepts is suggested in the image of the tolling bell. So I know with a lot of their lyrics, they're abstract. You got to really dig in. You got to really, you know, be there for a while and read a bunch of different stuff. So I'm not going to get into all of the lyrical breakdown because I'll probably get it wrong. And those of you who know them really well will know it way more than I did. But really enjoyed that one as well. We got one left. And we're going to go back over to Spotify. You see it below. Terrapin Station. D says this is the longest on the list at 16 minutes, 20 seconds. This is about as prog as the band ever got, and it's not all that prog. In 1977, the Dead recorded Terrapin Station, the album that's off of, which was produced by Keith Olsen, who had just finished producing Fleetwood Mac's self-titled album, the one that came out in 75, because Fleetwood Mac has two. The entire second side contained this song suite by the same name, which is the last on this list. It's a grandiose track, far more so than anything else they had recorded. It includes a full orchestra and choir. The lyrics by Robert Hunter are among his most descriptive and beautiful. He writes from the songwriter's perspective for the only time in his career. starting with, quote, let my inspiration flow in token rhymes suggesting rhythm, and later calling on, quote, inspiration move me brightly, light the song with sense and color, hold away despair. It is broken into 7 sections. Lady with a Fan, Terrapin Station, Terrapin Transit, At a Siding, Terrapin Flyer, and Refrain. Jerry Garcia was never a particularly flashy lead guitarist, preferring to lead with melodic lines as opposed to fast riffs. However, at around 12 minutes 15 seconds into this song, he lets out with 7 to 8 riffs that are the fastest thing this side of Jimi Hendrix. It was an uncharacteristic and fun surprise, so we'll be on the lookout for that. And I'll try to tell you, I got to look at the lyrics here before I tell you that. I'll try to let you know when we're going from one to another as best I can. All right, guys, this is the last one, about 16 minutes. Been great so far. Let's buckle up. All right, Terrapin Station, also known as Terrapin Station Medley, as you see it below as it's listed here on Spotify. Wow. I mean, once again, it's really hard to break all this down because there's so many things going on. It's really not about it. It's kind of like vibing with it and listening to it. You know, I talked about everybody had their time to shine. The guitar work, as always, was fantastic. But Bill and Mickey on the drums and percussion really had some chances to shine as we transition between things. It never got boring because you're mixing 3 different lyrical songs in there with 3 different instrumentations. In that last very part, it had almost an angelic chorus in there, you know, singing to you. So just a little bit. So just a nice mixture of things. Really what the song is about, it's great because I found a quote here from Robert Hunter from just last year when he talked about writing this song. It's an interview with a guy named Alan Paul. And Alan asked him, was the process similar? I don't know what he's talking about before this, right? But on more complicated instrumental songs like Terrapin Station, where fitting lyrics to music just seems more complicated. And Robert, who wrote the song, said, well, there's a little story behind that. It was a stormy day out at my house at China Camp, which is on the San Pablo Bay. There was a great storm outside, and I was really feeling energized by looking at it outside the window. I was just sitting at typewriter, and I put a piece of paper in and typed Terrapin Station. Then I thought, okay, what is this about? Oh, appeal to the muse, and then let my inspiration flow in token lines suggesting rhythm that will not forsake me until my tale is told and done. That is an invitation to the muse. Then I sat back, and this stuff just poured out in one sitting. It just so happened that Jerry was driving to San Francisco that day and came up with the appropriate melody for it. He came in to see me at China Camp the next day, and I handed him the lyrics, and he said, oh, I've got the music, and he did. That's one of those fairly mythological things that happen once in a while. There it was. Yes, Terrapin Station was magic. I didn't care for our recording of it because the producer took it into the studio in England by himself and threw all kinds of lush strings on it. I've never been able to listen to that without gritting my teeth, but I love the song. And the first time they played it, Bill Graham was standing next to me on the side of the stage, and he looked at me and said, you write that? And I said, yeah. And he nodded and went, pretty good. Coming from Bill Graham, that was incredibly high praise. Bill Graham, the promoter, Fillmore East and West, those sorts of things. So that kind of gives you a little hint into the song. I'm not going to sit here and read all the lyrics to you, but I did just enjoy all of it. It's so much stuff together. The way Dee put these suites together are fantastic. I know some of them were already put together and some of them Dee put together. The ones he chose are fantastic because they don't seem long, even though they are long. I mean, when I go back and look at my favorites, there's 4 suites, right? I'm not going to pick my favorite songs because really you got to sit here and marinate on these several times. Like really, I would think the right way to listen to this is listen to each song like 4 times. Now, if you did that, some of these songs, you'd be in it for an hour, but that's kind of the way to do this. But I'm kind of with Dee. I think that's it for the other one. The first track, which is 7 minutes long, might be my favorite. But boy, we listen to a lot of music between now and then. The weather report, I like that part 1 and 2 were so vastly different, and I couldn't decide which one I liked better. Help on the Way, Slipknot, Franklin's Tower. Maybe my least favorite, even though I really liked it. And then this Terrapin Station, just so grand, as Dee said in the suggestion. So let me know what you think. Which one of these do you like the best? What else should I give a listen to? You know, Dee mentioned a few of them at the start where they just don't work for time-wise, trying to fit this into an hour of music. But always appreciate you, Dee. Appreciate everybody for coming along for this journey, helping get me educated just a little bit on the Grateful Dead. If you'd like to help us, support us in any way like Dee does, check out the Patreon link below. Or in the Patreon link on the end screen, where I'll also link the Grateful Dead top 10 that I did for D. Until next time, guys, I will see ya.